Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel Query Solution. So this is the second session on the chapter life process today, and today we are going to cover in detail the topic of autotrophic mode of nutrition. So already I have uploaded a video on the introductory session of what is autotrophic and what is heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So today we are going to talk about this concept in detail. So we do know that autotrophic mode of nutrition is the process in which the plants are going to make their own food. That is the self-feeding mode of nutrition is what we discussed yesterday, right? So in this process mainly, where plants are making their own food, they make their food by a process which is known as photosynthesis. So I believe this is not a very new term to you. You already know what this term means mainly, right? So what is photosynthesis? Synthesis, in a way, if we say, we mean that it is something in relation to produce. And then what do we mean by photo? So photo means in the presence of light. And since here we are talking about plants, we are talking about photosynthesis. So we do know that what type of light here are we talking about? So we are talking about mainly the sunlight. So the process in which plant make their own food in the presence of sunlight is what is known as photosynthesis. And again, to clarify, since we are continuously using the term plants will make their own food, so what do we actually mean by saying food? So here we are talking about nothing but the glucose, right? So plant will make their own glucose in the presence of sunlight. That is what is known as photosynthesis. So now we are going to talk about that what are the main raw materials that a plant require to make its own food. So let us talk about the raw materials. Alright, so what all raw materials plant require to make its own food? So we can categorically speak as three main raw materials that plant need to make its own food. What is the first raw material here we are talking about? So we do know the very first important thing just now as we discussed that light is first of all the source of light, the source of solar energy is something which is very important for the plant to make its food, right? The second important thing the plant would require is definitely water. So you do know, you might have seen, you bring a small sapling of a plant, you keep watering it, and then what you see after a few days, you see that it grows, right? Some of the trees we see, we keep watering it in our gardens and all, and then they start bearing flowers and fruit. So what is this? This is nothing but a growth and development. And how is this growth happening? The growth is happening because by you are giving water, since the plant is getting sunlight, it is able to grow, it is able to develop, because it is able to perform photosynthesis, because it is getting the energy out of it which is helping in its growth and development, right? So first important raw material is your sunlight. The second important raw material is your water. Do you think there is something else also the plant would require? Yes. So plant would require certain gas. And what gas here are we talking about, which is there in the atmosphere all the time? So here we are talking about carbon dioxide. It is a very, very important component to make the glucose in the plant. How? We'll understand that in a very simple way since you are in grade 10 right now. So which part of the plant we know that sunlight will be able to capture it? So we do know the leaves of the plant will play here a very, very important role. And why leaves here are we talking about? Because these leaves of the plant have a specialized cell organelle which is known as chloroplast. So I think you already have an idea about it. And what do this chloroplast has? So this chloroplast has a photosynthetic active pigment which is known as chlorophyll, which plays a very, very important role in absorbing this solar energy. Where are we going to get, or where are the plants going to get the water from? So we do know that the roots are playing a very important part here. They are going to absorb the water, and then through their conducting tissues they are going to transport this water to the part where it is required. And then what about CO2? How is this gas going to come inside the plant body? So this is going to come through very minute openings which are there on the surface of the leaves of the plant especially, which are known as stomata. So what are these structures and how do they look like? We'll see them diagrammatically also. But these are the major raw material a plant would require to make its own food. So this is the first thing. Now the second important part here we need to see is what actually is photosynthesis all about. Or if I say, what are the major steps which are involved in photosynthesis? So there are again three major steps which are involved in photosynthesis. The first major step that is involved in photosynthesis is absorption of light energy or the solar energy. So absorption of solar energy. This is the first step which is involved in the process of photosynthesis. The second important step is conversion of this trapped solar energy, just now that we have trapped, conversion of solar energy into what form? Conversion of solar energy into chemical energy. And as soon as it gets converted, it also follows with splitting of the water molecule. So splitting of water molecule, and we have just now seen how the plant is going to get the water mainly, right? So absorption of light energy is the first step, then conversion of this light energy into chemical energy, which is followed by splitting of the water molecule, and the third very important step, reduction of CO2 into carbohydrates. Correct? So what was the end thing that we talked about? Here just now we spoke, right? Plant will make their own glucose in the presence of light. So what is the end result here we are looking for? We are looking for the production of a carbohydrate or a molecule of glucose. This is what photosynthetic end product is mainly, the production of glucose. And how is plant going to make its own food, or how is plant going to produce this glucose? By all these three steps. First of all, it will absorb the light energy. Secondly, it will convert this light energy into a chemical energy, which will be followed by splitting of the water molecule. And once these two steps are done, then the third step comes into picture, where a CO2 molecule will be reduced to produce molecules of your glucose, which is going to give energy to the plant. So this is what a basic photosynthetic process look like. Now, if I need to study about how does an equation of a photosynthesis look like, right? Because this is a very important question regarding your exams as well. You might be asked to write the equation, or you might get some questions regarding again to balance the equation or materials needed for the equation. So how does a balanced chemical equation for photosynthesis process looks like? So this is how the equation goes as: in the presence of sunlight and in the presence of chlorophyll, the plant will make molecules of glucose, which is C6H12O6, plus 6 molecules of water plus 6 molecules of oxygen as well. So this is very important, children. Now you need to pay attention over here. Many of the kids make a issue that they write 6CO2 and 6H2O. Now this, if you write 6H2O, this is not going to balance this equation. So this is very important to note, that whenever there is one molecule of glucose which is getting produced, it will always follow 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and then 12 molecules of water, right? So this is what a balanced chemical equation look like. To produce one molecule of glucose, the plant would require sunlight, as we talked. The plant would require chlorophyll, as we spoke. It would require carbon dioxide, which will come through the stomata. It will require water, which will come through the roots of the plant, and then it is going to produce a molecule of glucose here, which later will go through the process of respiration and will release energy in the form of ATP, and that ATPs will be utilized by the plants for further process. But at the same time, here as the end products of photosynthesis, even the molecules of oxygen too will be produced and water molecules too will be produced. So stomata will play a very crucial role, not just in getting in the CO2, but even getting out the oxygen, which is also produced here, right? So this is a very brief explanation on photosynthetic process. Now here I also want to talk about two very important reactions. I think you would have studied about them also, and if not, then there is a paragraph given in NCERT regarding the light reaction and dark reaction. So here I want to talk about these two reactions also. What is the light reaction and what is a dark reaction? So I hope you know, here since we talked about the 3 steps of photosynthesis, let us understand what is light and dark reaction through this part only. Now what do you think? What is a light reaction mainly? Light means something. Here we are talking about maybe a sunlight, and here we are talking about darkness, maybe night, right? Or also we can say this reaction as light dependent reaction. Another term for these reactions are light dependent reactions and light independent reactions. So dark reactions are also known as light independent reaction. Now see, based on grade 10, how much you want to know, how much you should be actually knowing what is a light and a dark reaction. So these two steps that here we have spoken are actually part of light reaction. What are the two steps? The absorption of light energy and the conversion of this solar energy into chemical energy and splitting of water molecule. These two steps here that we talk about are actually the part of light reaction. So if we talk about light reaction, these are the two steps that we are talking about. That is what is light reaction is. Now this third step that here we are talking about, this step actually does not require mainly sunlight. These two steps are dependent on light. Without sunlight, these two steps won't happen. That is why we say them as light dependent or light reaction. But this third step that here we are talking about, this step actually does not require the presence of sunlight. Even in the absence of sunlight, this step would happen. And that is the very same reason this is the step or this is the reaction that we say as a dark reaction. So you should be very clear what is a light and a dark reaction. These are the three steps already that we have spoken about. The first two steps are what are the light dependent phases because they require the presence of light energy. That's why light reactions. But the third step where reduction of CO2 is occurring in the form of glucose or carbohydrate is a light independent phase. It does not require the presence of light. Henceforth we call this reaction as a dark reaction, right? So now we are going to study about the little structure of these chloroplast and the stomatas and what are these guard cells and structure of the leaf. So let us quickly go through that. Okay, so this is the general structure of a leaf and this one is the cross section of a leaf mainly. So whenever we look like a general structure of a leaf, we do know that this straight line that centrally goes is something which is known as the midrib. Then these side lines that you get to see in the leaves are your veins. The even portion, the general green color portion evenly distributed that we see something which is known as the lamina. And here are the conducting tissues mainly just shown very superficially here, which are your xylem and the phloem. Now if you cut this leaf and observe it under a microscope, now this is how the actual structure of a leaf is going to look like mainly. So it will have the top covering which is known as the waxy cuticle, and then you do know that the upper and the lower surface of a leaf is something which is known as the upper epidermis and then the lower epidermis, right? So what is there in the upper epidermis here is what you can see the arrangements of the cells, the epidermal cells followed by the palisade cell. Now this is very important. Sometimes you get a question in your exam that what type of cells consist the chloroplast. So these are the palisade cells that you can see. These yellow dots that I am making are the structures which are actually the chloroplast. So inside the palisade cells is what you are going to see the structure of the chloroplast. That we have seen are the specialized cell organelles in plant which will contain the chlorophyll, correct? Now these are certain air spaces which are found, and lastly at the lower end if you see, now here are the lower epidermal cells and these are the guard cells. So the structure of guard cells in detail is what we are going to see next, but this is how a basic structure of a leaf is going to look like. So this is how the structure of stomata looks like mainly. These are nothing but the minute openings which are found on the surface of the leaf. So this is actually what you are seeing is a closed stomata, and then this one is the open stomata. So these stomatas are nothing but like these minute flap like structure, and these are guarded by these two cells that you can see here which are known as the guard cells, and these are the epidermal cells that you can see over here. So you would have studied in grade 9 how does the guard cells make sure the opening and the closing of stomata. When the water enters inside the cell, these cells get swollen up, and due to that swollen nature, what happens, if this is the guard cell, it will swollen up and it will result into the opening of your stomata. So this is how it opens, and when the water molecules exit out through them, they shrink in size, and due to that the opening which was open right now, it gets closed up. So this is how an opening and the closing of the stomata is happening in the plant with the help of guard cells, and these yellow dots that you are seeing over here are the structures of the chloroplast which are found in the guard cells as well, right?